Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kyle Hooper from mpfirst.com, and we have an amazing new series. Our series that we've got is called Daunting Games, and we know that there are a lot of people out there who take a look at a lot of games out there with long histories or lots of lore in them, and it can be kind of scary. Perfect example. So you got uh, Elder Scrolls, Destiny 2, Halo, Resident Evil, and we're going to hopefully dive into a lot of those to help a lot of those people who might be scared of jumping into a lot of this stuff because there's a lot of background lore. There's a lot of, especially with many of these series that go back decades, years. There's a lot of different content. There's comics, there's books, there's web series, there's video games, there's all kinds of types of content out there that contribute to the lore of many of these games. Our first episode, we're going to be focusing on Halo, and our first guest is a well-known Halo community member. He has over 182,000 subscribers on YouTube. His name, Ian Browning Smith, also known as Halo Canon. Really appreciate you joining us today, Ian.
I'm glad to be on.
Awesome. So you've been on YouTube for about 11 years, isn't it? 8 years, 9 years now.
As Halo Canon, officially that channel has been set up for. It'll be 9 years this year. Though I consider my official start to be 2013 because I did like a period where I was doing some serious stuff, and then it fell off for about 5 months. And then it was May of 2013. I put out this apology video and said, "Hey, we're gonna relaunch this. We're gonna do this again." So
yeah,
more officially, it'll be 8 years.
Yeah, do you going back to that time, did you kind of find it like you felt like you were doing a lot of this work, and did you find that there weren't a lot of people viewing it, or was it just like time constraints with other things in your life?
It's honestly hard to remember. I don't think like views were ever an issue. Like my time with Halo Canon is 8 to 9 years, but I'd been doing YouTube in some capacity since 2008 or 2009, and I was able to kind of leech off some of that initial subscriber base that I built up all those years back to get a pretty decent start with Halo Canon. But for whatever reason, right after Halo 4 came out, I played the hell out of it, enjoyed myself, and I definitely had like all these projects I wanted to do, but I just stopped for some reason that I really cannot remember what it was. But
yeah, well, we're happy you didn't stop.
Yeah, so am I.
Well, they're definitely happy you didn't stop. So just to kind of give people a bit of a background, how did you get into Halo originally?
That is a tale. So I originally found out about Halo I found a Halo 2 trailer in summer of 2004 with no idea what it was. And it was one of those like minute-long TV spots. It's the one that ends with the Prophet of Truth's line, "Those who said this day would never come, what have they to say now?" It's like this very epic and ethereal trailer, and I loved it. No idea what it was, but I loved it. And later on, and for some additional context, my parents didn't allow video games or didn't allow us to own video game consoles, not because they were any of those video games will rot your brain kind of things, but concentrate on schoolwork, and then maybe when you're old enough you could start playing games. Or it was the same kind of rules with TV and whatnot. But anyway, that they were fine with me playing games at friend's house. So I asked a friend, "Hey, have you heard of something that's called like Halo?" I think, and whips out Halo 2. I think this was now the start of 2005, so Halo 2 had just come out. Introduces me to it, and of course I was one of those people that at the start thought that Master Chief was called Halo. So I'm like, so this guy in the green armor, that's Halo? No, that's Master Chief. Well, who's Halo? Long story short, we got to Metropolis. I shot him with the tank, and I've been team killing ever since.
I feel like we all have had that moment, especially getting into it. Like, what's this Halo? Like, why is it called Halo?
Yes.
But that makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's a lot of people's stories kind of got started around Halo 2, which is weird because Halo 1 was the biggest game. I think it's just a lot of people jumped in with Halo 2 because there was so much hype built up around it.
Absolutely.
But I guess what I can't talk. Where we will start will be comparing Halo, like what is a good comparison to Halo? And obviously, most people are going to look at Halo and say Star Wars. And it's a fairly fair comparison just because of how
I'd
the
agree.
lore is built. There's a lot of different stories. There's so many different places you can go in the universe. This is kind of, Mass Effect's another great example. Any kind of space opera type game or media is usually you can go branch off in any direction. You can go to the past, you can go to the future, and it's space. You can create new planets anytime you want. It kind of works out that way.
True that.
So when you get into the Halo series, I think most people when they look at it is okay. Robot man goes in, he needs to kill these aliens, and that's kind of a lot of people think Master Chief's a robot. I feel like when they first play it and going through a lot of the earlier games, it is humanity versus the Covenant. There's not a whole lot of going off the main path. I'm talking more the mainstay games. It's usually humanity, Covenant. You got Flood in there as well. You got your factions fighting. Where do you think that Halo does a good job allowing people to say, okay, we know you like the main games, but you know what? Here's a small piece of side lore or a side project that we think you might enjoy that won't convolute your idea of the basics of humanity versus Covenant.
The early books especially do this very well, since they basically just build on that core conflict. They really are just taking the essentials of the Halo universe and then expanding upon those core essentials, the aliens, the humans of the time. Throw in some certain political issue in universe politics with the insurrectionists and whatnot, the true origins of the Spartans. But those early books are very much foundational, and to this day they do that incredibly well. And that's not to say, of course, that some of the newer books don't do that, but because of all that foundation, you can now have these books that expand that simply continue that tradition. A lot of the Troy Denning books do that, where it's just here's more UNSC and Covenant conflict. There can get some depth in there for sure, but it's very familiar. And then you can get into stuff like what Kelly Gay's been doing, where I'm going to take every piece of little tiny lore all over the place and mash them all together in a way that somehow makes sense, even if you don't have the overarching story from the 20 other books that preceded it.
Yeah, and I feel like that is Halo's biggest issue is bringing in those fans. And we saw this especially, again, if you haven't played it yet, it's been out long enough, so there will be some spoilers for some of the games in here. We'll definitely try to avoid spoilers on some of the media that a lot of people might have not read or watched or listened to. But Halo 5, like Halo 5 was, and Halo 4 to an extent. Do you feel like a lot of the community feels like where if you were new going into Halo 5, you would just be completely lost on what the hell's going on?
I would agree with that, but I would also add the caveat that even if you knew what had been going on, you'd still have no idea what was going on in Halo 5. Or you'd be there's an equal opportunity to be lost with that game, because there's a fundamental issue with how things are presented.
And with that fundamental issue, do you also I say Halo 4 as well, just because with a lot of the didact stuff, that was only ever really discussed in books / the really hidden terminals where, like yourself and me, like we understood like, oh, we really want to look into this. What does this mean? And you kind of learn about it. For fans that, played Halo 3, they loved Halo 3, they understood what Halo 3 was about, because let's be honest, you can say Halo 2, but in my opinion, Halo 3 was kind of the pinnacle of popularity, even as like your regular audience. That was the top. So a lot of people played Halo 3 and understood the story, the final act of the Covenant, we're finally beating them back. You got the Cortana situation. And then going into Halo 4, it's kind of like, okay, where did this big bad guy come from? Who are these Prometheans? Where did a lot of these things come from all of a sudden that weren't in any of the other games? Do you, like, as a fan, and if you can kind of take yourself out of the lore aspect for a second and just kind of put your head into a casual fan's space, do you think that would be fairly jarring for them?
It definitely can be, and I've seen mixed results when it comes to Halo 4, especially. Uh, I have plenty of people in my personal life who are not Halo fanatics, and especially at the time where with my job at the time, I had a lot of opportunity to talk to people that were uh, casual Halo fans, I guess is the best way to put it, in that they primarily played the games. They had very little knowledge, if any, of the expanded lore, and a lot of those people, at least in my life, ended up liking Halo 4 or were able to understand what was going on, even if they didn't like it. But obviously, you go online, and there are plenty of people that did have an issue. Um, and I think one thing is definitely, as much as I enjoy Halo 4, it it could use a lot of work with presentation because all the information you need to understand the game is in there 100%. But you get front loaded with so much of it in the infamous librarian cutscene that it's just all laid down there. There was very little obvious build up to that moment and to all the information that's dumped in there. Like you can have a moment where a new villain is introduced and you have no idea what he is. Like going back to my own experience, Halo 2, first scene, you get the cuts between the chief getting awards and the arbiter being put on trial, and I had no idea what was going on with anything. I was so confused. But
Yeah,
as the game plays, as you start picking up on things, uh, and that's a bit of that to a degree is missing from Halo 4, at least as much as there needs to be, considering what it's throwing at you. It doesn't need to answer every question, but it needs a little more or it needed something. Because again, everything's there, and the game kind of asks you to, but the game kind of asks you to engage with it in a different manner than previous games did. So,
yeah, I feel like, and I don't know how much you've played like the Gears of War series.
oh, I love Gears of War.
One thing that I've loved that the Coalition does with Gears 4 and Gears 5 is
Mm-hmm.
within the main menus or even at the start of the game, there's always a previously on Gears or
Yep.
state of the universe of where things are. That to me allows almost any fan to click a button, watch just a video that's between 5 and 7 minutes long and be like, okay, I understand the basics of this story. I understand where we're going without having to have necessarily played all of these games and read all of these books. And I
Yeah,
feel like Halo could desperately use something like that, especially with Halo Infinite coming out.
I definitely agree. Like when Gears of War 3 was coming out, there were I think three books leading up to that. Two, at least two, but I think it was three. And I remember thinking back then, how are they gonna communicate all this to these fans? Because the coalition's breaking down and then they're meeting with their former enemies and they're going to this island for a while. What, oh my god, there's all this story. And then they're able to sum it up in like a 2-minute cutscene at the beginning of the game. Like, wow, I wouldn't have thought that was possible, but good on you. And then yeah, you get to the coalition. Gears 4, I think, has done this the best. They have that opening, what is it, 5-10 minute level
Yeah.
where you're just playing through the past and these are moments that a lot of Gears fans had never seen at all, unless you had read the books or something or knew the deep lore. So it's both bringing new fans into up to speed and also familiarizing older fans with stuff they might not have known before. And just Tim and Eric mind blow again right there, man. Holy crap. They nailed it. And yes, uh I would love if Halo Infinite could do something like that. Because some kind of primer, I was I'm sorry to keep rambling, but I'm just reminded
Go for
back
it.
when Halo 4, if you could probably still find this, but back when Halo 4 was coming out, they announced that Conan O'Brien and his secondary guy Andy something whose name I'm forgetting, and I'm so sorry. But like they did some voice work for Halo 4, which was ultimately in the game. But during that interview, they talk about how they're putting together this previously on Halo video that they ended up
Mhm.
showing to Conan. And I was so disappointed when that wasn't in the game. It's like, what? This is so perfect. Not only did you get the guy from all the lore videos back who recently did all those Oni archives videos, who's got an amazing voice, but it does what that's like what you need. You need something to say, here's what's happened previously, and here's what's going on in the interim. And It's something to prime the fans.
Yeah, and for a lot of people that don't know some of the deeper lore before the Covenant even shows up, or is even on the blip of humanity, humanity fights each other because
As
of,
you do.
yeah, as you do. Essentially, I'm making this really simple to understand, but essentially, a lot of the outer colonies don't like being governed by the inner colonies. It's like, if you want to put it in perspective, it's old school. And this is what I got it for it, especially watching. I've been watching The Crown recently on Netflix.
Oh,
Watching England lose control a lot of their Middle Eastern colonies because they say, why are you telling us what to do? You don't know how we live. You don't know what we do. And it's a bit about that. And I would love to be able, and I'm sure you, as a huge lore guy, you would love to be able to play a flashback like we do in Gears of War, where you're
yeah.
fighting, the insurrectionists as,
Yes.
even as
Oh
a
my
soldier,
God.
as a UNSC soldier. I think that would be amazing. Or maybe you play the first time Master Chief, gets put on the ground against the insurrectionists. Like something like that really fleshes out, okay, this is the past. Oh, it's not always fighting. And it allows people to get interested in that back lore without
Hmm.
even necessarily having to have thought about it before. It puts that in your mind, like, oh, I wonder if there's any other, context to this. And you start looking at books and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that I could do this. Um,
Very true.
where, in your opinion, if you could erase all of the games, or we don't want to erase all the games, but
Hmm.
if you had to erase all of the games and you had to point someone in a direction of, hey, this is a good starting point to the Halo series, but it can't be a game, where would you point them?
I would still always point people towards Halo: The Fall of Reach. Uh, it was written to be an introduction to the universe, and to this day, it fulfills that function incredibly well. Arguably more so with the newer editions that come with all this extra bonus content, because you can kind of get, like, regardless of whether you know what that bonus content ties into, you can just get a sense of, oh, here's some quick samples of the larger universe that's available out there.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think I already know the answer to this from you, but I'm gonna bring up the Fall of Reach, uh, I guess, mini show, mini movie, animated
Yeah.
series. Um, and if people that don't know, so when Halo 5 launched, obviously they did have that idea, what me and Ian were talking about here, of introducing someone, maybe a casual fan, in a little easier by having an animated series. And it was, a great idea.
Hmm.
But a lot of lore people and a lot of people that were into the Halo universe did not like this series. Ian, why don't you tell us why?
Well, a big reason, and this one wasn't restricted just to the hardcore lore fans, is it's called the Fall of Reach, and the Fall of Reach never happens in that series. It cuts off. Obviously, it's an adaptation of the book of the same name to a degree, and it cuts off when the Spartans first gear up in their armor for the first time, which is about a third, maybe just short of a halfway through the book. And for the purposes of trying to introduce people to the concept of blue team that you would play Halo 5 as in, wow, words, what are they? It's not a bad idea, but then don't call it the Fall of Reach. You're setting up an expectation, and anyway, yeah, there was that. A bigger reason when you start getting into the deeper lore side is, of course, the depiction of events. They needlessly change events, which then changes how which you're gonna have to change things going from a book to another medium, regardless. But they change them in such a way that it loses the original intent of that moment. Uh, Probably one of my favorites to cite is uh, the scene when, right after John and his fellow Spartans come back from this wilderness training, and it becomes the moment where he gets selected as squad leader. But it's this tiny moment while he's talking to his commander and to the doctor that's putting the program together, the project head, Dr. Halsey, and he says, "What's the highest rank I can achieve?" And it seems like this innocuous moment, but it goes against John's character, the Master Chief's character. He doesn't care about rank. He never has cared about rank. So, and the only reason that's in there is, hey, look, guys, reference, Master Chief reference. You get it? Oh. But probably a better well-known scene is the gym fight scene where John proves himself to be an absolute psychopath rather than somebody who just doesn't understand the new strength he was augmented with.
I do remember that scene. And for those that don't know, the scene that we're talking about is obviously Spartans go through a lot of testing,
physical
and
enhancements.
Enhancements. You know, you get injections, you do things. Yeah, you had bone graphite, I think, and tons of different medical term stuff. That actually does, I believe, make sense if you were medically inclined to understand what half of it means. Yeah, he doesn't understand his strengths, and a lot of these more biased soldiers, because obviously, for a lot of people that don't know, Spartans aren't liked really by a lot of at the time anyway, by a lot of the mainstay UNSC forces, just because they seem like these freaks, I guess you could say. Like they were, the only reason you're better than me is because you were given enhancements. So there are a lot of these soldiers that don't like that. John, so Master Chief, is in the gym training after he gets them. These ODST soldiers start kind of picking on him, wanting to fight him. But in the show, it seems like he just randomly goes up and starts fighting them for absolutely no reason.
I mean, he like in the same as the book, he's ordered to fight them by a high-ranking officer. But then, like in the comic, sorry, not in the comic. Well, technically in the comic as well, but in the book that it all comes from, John, he ends up severely injuring and even killing a few of these ODSTs, but it's completely by accident. He hits them one or two times with what he thinks is a normal punch, but now that he's augmented, it's got like all this extra force behind it. In the animated version, there is literally a moment when he holds a guy down and starts beating the ever-living crap out of the guy. And it's like, what? That goes against what you were told to do. Why are you a psychopath now? What the heck?
And I will say as well, this is so different than a lot of people who might have heard of Halo Reach. And one of the reasons why a lot of people who are big into the lore, 343 kind of got themselves, I wouldn't even say it was a situation. It was more of a Bungie situation. Obviously, Halo Reach was Bungie's last Halo game. They did a lot with Halo Reach that made absolutely, and Ian has a fantastic video on his channel attempting, and I say attempting because I have no idea how you ever did this. He attempted to break down the Fall of Reach book, which is a very popular book, like Ian mentioned, and he tried to make it make sense because it happens close to the same time that Halo Reach does, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And there's actually a lot of direct overlap. Because the actual Fall of Reach was August 30th, 2552 in universe. And so both The Fall of Reach and Halo Reach eventually converge on that final day.
And a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you got to do a lot of creative thinking to make it make sense.
Yes. And that's essentially what I had to do.
Yeah. And it's hard. Like it's hard to think about that. And as a fan, I feel like this is how it happens with any series. It's hard to imagine that yourself as a fan can instantly think about this, but the writers can't. And it's hard to understand that a lot of the time because in your mind, you're like, this seems like a simple thing, like a no, don't do this because it's going to convolute. But a lot of the writers are hired based on, okay, we need you to write for this single video game and kind of ignore a lot of the stuff. Like you want to allow writers to have creative freedom, but in a series like Halo, like Star Wars, like Resident Evil, like all of these games that have these big expanding, narratives that have been going on forever, it's hard to have creative freedom and also respect, like, you can't touch this. You need to make this make sense. Like, there's a lot of gatekeeping, not in a bad way, but in a way of you need to keep what people already loved to read or write or to play while also expanding. And I can completely understand how that is difficult.
Agreed. Like, I don't agree with what Bungie ended up doing with Halo Reach, but I also get it. Or going even just beyond the writing, when you talk, I don't know if you wanted to get into this or not, but like the shift in the art direction that's most notable between Halo Reach and Halo 4.
Let's jump into that. That was kind of another topic.
Yeah, it's like, there's certainly a legacy to respect with
Mhm.
with the way things have traditionally looked. But then at the same time, you're bringing in all these artists that have their own styles and their own creations, and the studio itself. They do there. I bet you that they were thinking, let's define our own Halo,
Mhm.
so that we're not just the Bungie replacements. Let's try and make our own name, make our own
Yeah, I
voice.
just want to give people
And
a little bit of a background
yeah,
before we
no,
jump into
please,
this.
please go ahead. Sorry.
So what Ian's talking about here is with Halo 4, it was 343's first game. And I'm actually writing an article for MP First about this right now about what Halo Infinite really needs to do. And with Halo 4, 343 went in and said, okay, we need to define, I'm paraphrasing here, but we need to define ourselves as our own studio. We need to make ourselves known and know that we're making our Halo game that we want to make, which is fine. I'm 100% okay with that. The problem was, in my opinion, that Halo decided or 343 decided to go, let's not ease fans into this. Let's throw them in the deep end and say, hey, you better enjoy this because this is what Halo is now. The biggest
Yeah.
problem with that is there was no contextual canon to say this is why. Why do the grunts look completely different? Why do the elites look completely different? Why do a lot of the weapons that we've come to know and love now look different? Now with Halo 5, I feel like they've done a fairly good job explaining, okay, it was an easy way out, but it was a way out in general of, okay, no, these are different subspecies. We have, black people, white people, Asian, all these different races in humanity. Well, that's the same thing with the Covenant and a lot of the aliens. There's just different ways they look. But the problem with that was there's no regular, Halo 3, Halo 2 looking guys in Halo 4 in most of Halo 5. Like they don't mix.
Yeah.
And that's your big problem. I feel like if 343 had come out in Halo 4, be like, okay, we want to still do our own art style, but we want to also explain to people that, hey, there's just different subspecies of all of these aliens that you've already, come to know. Do you think that would have kind of fixed a lot of the jarringness that was Halo 4?
It might have helped for some people, I think, because a lot of people these days do latch on to those explanations. But when Halo 4 came out, I'm not entirely sure how much it would have helped it or not. It would have helped to some degree, but how much I could not say to save my life.
Now, is this something
Um,
you'd want to see more in Halo Infinite? Like you want to see all these different looks, regardless of when they were made.
oh
So you
yeah,
want,
definitely. Now that it has been set in stone that yes, everything looks, there's all these different subspecies and phenotypes of the different Covenant species. If at all possible, like actually Halo Wars 2 actually did this on a small scale, but yeah, I'd love to see the inclusion of all the different types, or at least even just a few different types. Like one of my favorite suggestions has to do with the Jackals. Um, of course, we know what the Jackals used to look like in the old Bungie games. They were tall and kind of
kind of
uh,
bird-like.
they're very bird-like, and I was trying to think like stringy, I guess.
Yeah,
But
very
yeah, they
long
have
snouts.
yeah, and then you get to Halo 4. Oh my god!
What
And
would you
they
describe,
look
like
like,
dinosaurs?
yeah, they basically look like velociraptors, which there's the dino bird connection in actual biology, so it works on a level, but they look so radically different from what you expect, or from what their role normally is. And in the wake of the decision, like, oh, this is just yet another subspecies alongside the skirmishers we saw in Halo Reach.
Yeah.
People had the idea. It's like, well, maybe you make the classic Jackals snipers, and then you make these new ones the frontline troops, and that'd be a good way to differentiate them because they look so radically different. Break up what kind of roles they have, and swinging over to Halo Wars 2 again. I mentioned that they did this kind of mix of the different species looks. The suicide grunts in that game are the 343 grunts, and then the regular grunt infantry are the classic grunts. And it's like, oh, that's a cool way you could do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that way. I want 343, and I think a lot of Halo fans, they want 343 to be able to create their own thing because
Mm-hmm.
they have introduced a lot of cool things to the Halo universe that I would have never thought of. And I like that. Yeah, there was the whole um, rocket launcher debacle with Halo 5 that a lot of people were upset about. And for everyone that doesn't know about that, the Sphincter rocket launcher,
Spanker.
Spanker, excuse me, Spanker rocket launcher is next to the battle rifle, probably the most iconic Halo weapon. And they got rid of it. They got rid of the look of it in Halo 5, and people were not happy. They brought it back as a DLC weapon, so it's again. It felt like a lot of 343's fixes to this was, oh no, it's still there. It's just a different version of it, which is fine. But it just felt like that was a lot of a reaction to the community saying, no, why did you do this? I don't think we wanted this.
I'll be honest. I was one of the few people that prefers the new
really?
M57 Pylum that Halo 5 introduced.
Do you find? Do you
sorry,
like? No. Do you find that a lot of with 343's games, if when people play them, you'll notice a lot more of the weapons have a more rugged military style look to them?
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's actually I end up enjoying a lot more of 343's designs for various weapons and even vehicles because in part because of that. But
is there one? I'll ask this as a two-part question. Give me a weapon or a vehicle that you like that 343 changed that you actually like better, and something that they changed that you actually dislike.
Their default Warthog, I love the way it looks. And going gameplay wise for a moment, I think they improved on the gameplay, but appearance, I think it looks a lot better. Or I like it more. It's not to say I disliked the old version by any means, but it's like I suddenly see this new version, like, I actually like some of the ideas, like the bars on the side. There's a proper name for those, and I'm forgetting what they are right now. But that I like the gas cans or the hydrogen cans on the back. It's just these cool little details. Like, oh, that's cool. On the other side of that, though, I am not a big fan of the mongoose design they introduced in Halo 5 and seem to be continuing with Halo Infinite. It just looks so. It looks like it could be cracked in half so easily. While it looks too thin, too small. I guess.
It's like really skinny in the middle almost.
Yeah, exactly. And like the back, rather than like a proper, the back's like just has a couple. They're like wheelie bars almost on it if you want to go back to the 90s and biking. But
yeah, so let me bring this a little more back around after we've talked about the art style there, just more to the lore. For a lot of people that are scared or to jump into the Halo series, and we know 343 is targeting Halo Infinite as a spiritual successor. Being, okay, there's a ton of lore about the past games. We want this to be a little bit more of a clean slate. I know you have an amazing series on that. I'm assuming that you're continuing where you prime people for every game that comes out, and they're excellent for new people. So you did one all the way through the MCC collection, priming people for Halo Reach, Halo 1, Halo 2, as they released on PC.
Yep.
For people that are thinking about getting an Infinite, because I genuinely, and I'm not trying to be like an Xbox fanboy here, I genuinely don't think that there's going to be, unless God of War, let me accompany this. Unless God of War releases this year, which I don't think it's going to, I genuinely don't think there's a bigger game that has as much writing on it as this game. In every aspect. In every aspect. Art design, gameplay wise, multiplayer, longevity as a series, because we know that, the 343 is bringing Halo multiplayer free to play, and they're bringing more of a games as a service model. Now, we've seen games as a service model, and you can disagree or agree with this. The only team that I've actually seen it do extremely well, and I can't say extremely, but have been able to continuously do it without completely alienating everybody, and I know this is controversial, but is Destiny. I feel like Destiny has done a fairly good job with their content of rolling it out, and especially now, I play Destiny a little bit now, and I've actually quite enjoyed it. But if you're going to do a games as a service model, we've seen Anthem, it big fail. We've seen Avengers, again, fail. Like, they have to be very cautious of what they do. And with the games as a service model, that also includes lore, like we're seeing with Destiny, like a long, expansive storyline. As somebody that's deeply into the Halo universe, how do you think that 343 brings us to the table being able to create a new story, but also having to, excuse my language here, the clusterfuck that is Halo 5's ending. How do you think they're able to bring that in without alienating everybody or picking a side and saying, no, this is for, we want specifically to focus on new fans, or no, we want to focus specifically on old fans? How do you think that should be done, in your opinion?
Well, well, honestly, I think 343 kind of laid out a roadmap of what they want to do, of how they want to approach that. And I think that's honestly the best approach you can have. And that is, you're essentially, with Halo Infinite, everybody is kind of going in with the same base knowledge, which is we have no idea what's going on. Like, obviously, some people are going to know what happened in Halo 5, and so other people will just know, hey, that's the Master Chief, and this is a Halo ring, and I recognize that. But the story specifics are pretty much up in the air. We know that the Banished are going to be in there. We know that Cortana has had some audio, so she's probably going to be in there. But what roles they're playing, how the Halo ring got destroyed, we're all equally lost. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, of course, to let that story unfold as you play the game. And in theory, I think that's a really good way to do it. It'll all matter, though, and this is, I think, been 343's biggest weakness with previous campaigns, because I believe Halo 4 is set up in such a way that it's meant to be welcoming to new people, but it's the execution where they keep falling short. Again, Halo 4, all the information is dumped in a single cutscene, and actually, there's been a whole recent release of cut audio that further fleshes out and kind of would have primed people for revelations later in the game. So
yeah,
if they can nail that execution, they're on the right path.
Yeah, and I feel like they have. It's funny because when I play Halo 4, as somebody who understands lore, like, I really enjoy the campaign. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't a fan of the multiplayer. Actually, I can't say that. I was a fan of the multiplayer because I was a fan of Call of Duty. And that's essentially what Halo 4's multiplayer was at that point. They were trying to capitalize on that. And then with Halo 5, didn't like the story. Thought the multiplayer was fantastic, though. So it's almost like they need to hit all two aspects at the same time with this game. And now going back to the lore, maybe you can explain. You'll explain this better than I can. But this Halo ring that we see in the trailers, lore fans have known about this Halo ring for a long time. Yeah. And this is, as I recall, this is one of the original Halo rings. And when I say original Halo rings, without getting too deep into the lore, the people that created these Halo rings, they originally created, was it 10 of them?
12.
12. Yeah. And then they got destroyed, correct?
Yeah, pretty much all of them got destroyed. There was a second batch that had been made that were supposed to be better than the original. And
they were smaller, correct?
Yeah, and they were much smaller. And there's a lot of different technical stuff you don't need to worry about. It's not important to any of the games. It's cool background information I want to emphasize. But there were 6 of these newer rings, and then you had this last remaining original ring, which the Forerunners, the people that created the rings, were able to recover and repurpose for use in the final array. So yeah, this Halo ring that we're going to in Infinite has a lot of history within the universe that may or may not be essential for understanding what's going on, but at the very least, it looks like 343 is going to give people the opportunity to dive into a lot of that history.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it would be... I have always enjoyed this idea, and you can tell me your opinion on it. Mm-hmm. Going the way of being able to do something like what Destiny has with their, not Destiny 1, but Destiny 2, with their Grimoire, where it's all in the game, and it gives people that want to experience more of a backstory and more lore a way to do that. And if you don't care, you can just leave it. Do you think that would be beneficial for the Halo universe to kind of have an in-game lore tab?
Oh yeah, 100. I actually made, I think it was right before E3 2018, but I said it must have been, because the video was titled Halo 6 needs a codex. So yeah, it was pre-Infinite when we were still thinking it was going to be a numbered title. But yeah, Halo Wars 2, again, it laid all the groundwork for what 343 needs to do. I almost said Bungie, but what 343 needs to do there. It had a feature called the Phoenix Logs, and these were little collectibles that you would either naturally unlock as you progress through the game, but you could also go out and hunt additional logs during your playthrough. And they gave a ton of backstory on the factions of the game, on the individual characters, the setting, the state of the universe itself. Not stuff that you necessarily needed in order to enjoy the game itself, but just there to enrich the experience. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I definitely think that is long overdue in Halo. Like that should have been in Halo 4, honestly. At the very least, Halo 5, considering all the crap that it throws at you. But
and
I was actually going to say, just one last thing. I think we might actually get that because at the E3, or sorry, not the E3, at the July 2020 demo, the one moment when they pull up the menu, you see 3 tabs across the top, and one of them says database. So I'm hopeful, a lot of us are hopeful, that is essentially going to be like a Mass Effect style codex, or at the very least something like the Phoenix Logs. Though I think Mass Effect is the better example there for what you want to base that sort of thing on.
Yeah, I feel like it's so beneficial because then, you know what, for people that, people that don't like to read, sit there and read, or people that don't care, a perfect example of this on YouTube for me, who's done this really well, and I feel like you're going to be the person to do it for Halo, if they do that, is Bife for Destiny.
Oh, I love Bife.
He's great. Yes. And I've reached out to him. I'm hoping to, on a future episode, we're hoping to have him on and talk about Destiny. Because, again, Destiny is a little bit like Halo, where it's Bungie. It's crazy how much Bungie's created. But just the lore, like, on the base, it's aliens, go shoot them. But underneath, there's this massive expansion of lore. And what you do so well and what he does so well is he taking all this stuff that Bungie or 343 puts in this game and allowing people to be like, okay, now I want to consume this, but I don't want to sit there and have to think about it. I want someone to explain it to me like I was 5 or 10. Yeah. And you guys do that so well, and Bife does that extremely well. I love watching his videos. Going back to the Halo ring that we're going to see, is there something that you would recommend, either a piece of content or a piece of lore, that you would recommend if people who want to enjoy Halo Infinite but maybe haven't delved deeper into the lore or haven't done it in a long time? Is there a piece of content that you would recommend and say, hey, I think this is a good primer for the series for you?
Well, I know at this point, if we're not sticking strictly to official stuff, I made my own History of Installation 07 back in 2018, and I know Hidden Xperia has done a more recent video on that. I'm sure a few other YouTubers probably have as well, but I remember Lucas specifically had one of those recently. And in both of those, we go over the basic history in a way that's simple to understand and shouldn't be too out there for somebody who is unfamiliar with Halo. Though beyond that, like if you're new to Halo and you're looking for a quick primer on that, I don't really think there's one that strictly exists that would specifically get into that. Like there's Halo Mythos, which is a beautiful collection of art and story, and it's not too thick. It just goes over the Halo story literally from start to finish. The finish in this case being the start of Halo Wars 2. Or you have the Halo Official Spartan Field Manual, which that one was aimed more at kids, but I think it's just as engaging for anyone else. And it talks about the Halo installations and their current status at that time. But beyond that, yeah, you'd have to go, if you want something specifically on Installation 07 right now, that's essentially going to be, check out your favorite Halo YouTuber. They should have something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now I kind of want to move away from the games here, just as we're getting closer to the end, and talk about the Showtime show. And obviously, kind of comes back to the same thing we've been talking about. They need to make the show accessible to everybody, but also have a lot of Easter eggs or lore-based stuff that people like you or me are going to be like, oh my god, they're introducing this. Oh my god, like I've been waiting for this. If you had complete control over the show, where do you think the best point, or what do you think them doing in the show would cover both aspects there?
If it were entirely up to me, I would take the show, I would set it early on in the war. Does specifically one doesn't matter a whole lot, but I would say like first season would be essentially just introducing this Covenant conflict. Maybe set it in the late 20s. So the conflict isn't entirely known to everybody. Kind of like with Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn, where no, they don't know about the Covenant, but then the Covenant invades, and so you have the perfect kind of uh, audience surrogate. There's the phrase I was looking for, where they don't have as much knowledge of what's going on. But then you could follow the people on a particular colony as the Covenant is invading, how they deal with that. Follow from a few perspectives, a few military ones, maybe a couple civilian ones, and for sure some Covenant ones to get that all well rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And my big thing is Spartans should only show up like at the finale or something, or like be hinted at and then show up at the finale, because I wouldn't want the show to focus on them as main characters, but I feel they work best in expanded media as something that just kind of shows up now and then, and you get to see their true power.
Yeah. I
when
understand that. Like, do you think that because it is a TV show, it does have a budget, do you think they're gonna maybe even go a little farther back and maybe even do insurrection type stuff? Because I think a lot of people's big worry, myself included, is doing CGI or doing something about the Covenant. Because obviously that needs to look good. If you're gonna
Yeah.
base your show around fighting the Covenant, your Covenant better look good.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, is that something that you worry about a little bit? Like getting that CG, or, if they do costume, I don't know what they're going to do, getting that right to make you instantly, we know it's not real, but making your brain think instantly, you see it and be like, okay, that's believable. I could believe that's a thing.
Yeah. That's certainly something that's been on my mind. Um, I don't think that they're going to go anywhere near the insurrection. Sadly, I would love that to if really get into the gray
Yeah, like
area
the
of
only reason I say that is
but
because it would be
no,
the
yeah,
easiest way
yeah, for
to, because
sure.
there's all human, right? So you
Yeah,
don't have to
it's
worry
a lot
about too
less.
much of that
Yeah,
CG
a lot more
stuff.
practical, a lot less risk of your CG looking like crap. Um, I think really the key for them will be like they're in a position where it can be done really well, I think. But and actually we've seen that they're at least doing some kind of practical effects, because there was that official image they released where it was like just an elite arm that they had modeled out for some scene, some unknown reason. So they're doing some sort of mix of practical, and obviously you'll have to do some CG at some point. But um, I guess ultimately is if they do it, if they choose those shots right, like a good comparison, I guess, is the way the Elite Zealot looks in Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn and Halo Nightfall. For anyone who might be unfamiliar, those were two live action Halo projects. One meant for Halo 4, one meant for Halo 5. But I'm pretty sure they used the exact same model in both productions. But the one in Forward Unto Dawn looks amazing. And that's because all the shots it's in are at night and in heavy shadow, so you can barely see it. Whereas the elite in Nightfall is out in broad daylight, and you can see how CG it is. I think they did the best they had with the budget they had. Like I think the tracking, like especially when Locke is actually on top of it and shooting it, it looks like he's moving in line with the elite very well. But the believability still isn't there because the elite looks like crap. The action isn't shot very well. Like you can tell that Mike Coulter is just moving his arm back whenever he shoots the pistol. So
Yeah, it's hard. Like
yeah,
Halo's one of those series, like, because everything's already established, you can't just magically create something. Like a perfect example is Star Wars. Like with Star Wars, because everything has been, there's millions of species of aliens that we can just create new ones just like that and not have to worry about what it looks like because it's new.
Hmm.
they have they have that option. With Halo, it's you I don't think they can introduce a new species on a TV show, in my opinion. I think you have to stick with what's already canonized,
Yeah.
and you have to stick with those looks. Like I don't know if you, like you mentioned before, doing the hybrid look between, you know, your Halo 2, 3, 1 species and then your Halo 4 and 5. I don't really know it, because in Forward Unto Dawn and Nightfall, they stuck with the Halo 4 and 5 look of the elites, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Um, and I remember watching Forward Unto Dawn, and I really enjoyed how they did that entire elite sequence. And for people that don't know, it was a dark. It's almost like a horror, and this has
It
always made
really
me want.
is. Yes.
It's always made me want like a Halo horror game, which I feel like is an extremely missed opportunity with how many
100%.
how many things can scare you in the Halo universe. Um, but yeah, just keeping it dark. Obviously, the budget was a little lower, so just keeping it a little bit of a more mystery. But we're hoping that this TV show has a much bigger budget than both of these projects combined, which I think it will. Um, so the CG, if done right, I think they can kickstart this to branch off into a live action Halo series, and you know, move on from there and keep and make more series out of it. Is there a certain portion, you know, you mentioned the insurrection. Is there another place or time in the Halo universe that you would love to see done live action if done correctly?
Oh man, yeah, the insurrection, the early years of the war, probably the two that immediately come to mind. Is I mean, I would personally love, maybe if not live action, I'd love to see a game set around this. But going all the way back to the ancient human and Forerunner conflict, that's
Mm-hmm.
some real deep lore cuts though. That will never happen. We'd be lucky if we could get a game that even touches on that period, let alone a TV show.
I Correct me if I'm wrong. The
Otherwise,
only time the games have ever mentioned it were in those Halo 4 terminals, correct?
they meant, yeah, in there, and then there's some stuff in Halo 5 that expands on that,
Okay.
uh, since it's continuing that storyline.
Yeah, and for
And
people that
honestly,
yeah, and for people that are interested in this stuff or haven't heard of this before, there's a ton of content around way before the Halo, what we know in the Halo games conflict. There's way, like, this stuff goes back millions of years,
yeah,
and it talks about ancient humans, and you know, the short version of it is ancient humans fight this other ancient race called the Forerunners, and the Forerunners essentially defeat them, and they what's the term for it, where they de like
devolve them, so like make
devolve them.
them into more primitive forms, and that's where you get like the
That's where
the
we get our
ancient,
history, like cavemen.
yeah, yeah, exactly, basically turning them back into cavemen, this once spacefaring race that could rival even the Forerunners. And then,
So it is funny because
yeah,
like, they have thought about it. They have thought about this stuff, obviously, trying to connect things with stuff that's already established. Like regular human history is a thing in the Halo universe. Like anything from the caveman era to, you know, now, like that's all. It's all regular stuff. Like I believe, like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like your major battles happen, like World War II, you know,
yep,
World War One. Like that's all stuff that's in the Halo universe,
yep.
canonized. Um, so it's not much of a stretch that they could go back and do this. But yeah, I understand what you mean, that it'll never happen, because it is a lot of explaining. and
Although, to
and
give you one other potential area I'd love to see fleshed out again, the War of Beginnings, which, for anyone who doesn't know, that was the original conflict between the prophets and the elites, the two founding species of the Covenant. At that, the end of that conflict, of course, resulting in the founding of the Covenant. Which,
yeah,
so,
that would be really interesting, especially watching the Covenant grow.
oh yeah,
Watching them bring in, you know, your different species, your hunters, your jackals, because again, canon wise and lore wise, there's some stuff written on this, but I feel like, especially like, we've heard of in lore the taming of the hunters.
hmm,
But there hasn't been anything, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, there hasn't been anything that's delved deep into it
no,
too
yeah,
much.
like the closest we get is one of the Halo 2 anniversary terminals, which directly depicts an ancient arbiter being sent to, find the secret of the hunters. But that's literally it, and you get it for like a couple seconds. Other
Yeah,
than
like
that,
just
it's basically just an event that happened at some point.
yeah,
And we'd
and
even know
that's
some
so interesting.
specifics.
That's
but
so
we never
interesting
get to see it depicted. Yeah.
and that's interesting to just be able to hear or watch or play, like just
Hmm.
knowing how the Covenant became the Covenant,
Dude,
essentially. Like,
one of my favorite games I love to pitch whenever people ask, like, hey, what kind of Halo game would you like to hear? Is I always call it Halo Chronicles of the Arbiter, and it would basically in my mind it would be an episodic game. Each episode you play as a different Arbiter throughout history, and you just kind of get to play through Covenant history as the Arbiters, and it would be so cool. I think.
yeah, no,
I don't know how much money it would make, but I think it would be
oh,
so cool.
I think you underestimate. I genuinely think that if you put the Arbiter next to Master Chief, I think 75 to 80% of people will instantly know who that is. I think
Oh
he does that have the type of recognition of, oh, that's the Arbiter. Obviously, what people don't know is his name is. It's kind of the same as the Halo Master Chief thing. Like his name is not Arbiter. That's just his
yeah,
title.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be a fantastic game, just kind of jumping because Covenant history is so interesting to me. I think
for
it's
sure,
one of the things that haven't been expanded on enough within the games.
for sure.
Uh, that could be, and I feel like it would be still easy for newer players to understand.
Right.
Um, Now, I wanted to have a small segment near the end of the show where we kind of talk about some misconceptions that people have on the Halo games or whatever game series you're talking about on this week. And I wanted to start off, obviously, if you could, almost like a Mythbusters, if you could
Mhm.
Mythbusters.
Sure.
I think the first one is after Halo 3 ends, why does Master Chief's armor look different in Halo 3?
Oh, this is such a fun one. And yeah, this one is kind of the epitome of 343 mishandling certain ideas. So the reason that the Master Chief's armor looks different is in the 4.5 years he was in cryosleep, Cortana, she had to find stuff to do to keep herself occupied, being an AI. You can't just have a computer sit there and do nothing. A sentient computer, that is. So she found nanomachines somewhere on board the Forward Unto Dawn. And you know what? Especially since then, the use of nanomachines has been much more fleshed out. So I can believe, maybe she recovered some medical nanomachines and repurposed them. But she found these nanomachines, got them into the cryo chamber, and decided to spend however long it was reforming the Master Chief's armor, basing it on an older look, which has since been revealed to be the armor that we see on the cover of Halo Silent Storm.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yep. That makes sense. Another one that I have for you is between Halo 4 and Halo 5, what happens to Cortana?
Quickly going back to the previous question for just a sec.
Yep.
I would ultimately say to any of your listeners, if you're genuinely curious about it, there's information out there, but ultimately just don't worry about it. It's a new look, and that's it.
And that's what
The
the show's kind
conversation,
of designed
yeah,
to do, because there are
yeah,
people out there that
it's
are like,
so
this, I
convoluted
don't
to
want to
get
jump into
into.
this because there's this much stuff to understand. And it's like
Yeah,
a lot of the answers to a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk over this series and all these shows is going to boil down to you don't worry about it.
yeah,
It doesn't affect anything. It's small details that people who are big into the series
yeah,
that have that I know I have the ADD of I need to know why, I need to understand, I need to Google everything
yes,
and understand, and that's how you get into a lore, and it can be detrimental. And this is me taking the experience. It is detrimental to your mental health attempting to figure out everything because at the end of the day, these are video games and they're meant to be fun, and they're not supposed to be this. Okay, well that didn't look like this 20 years ago when they made Halo 1. Why does it look like this now? It's video games. Like that
yeah,
that's what a lot of it's just chalked down to. Obviously, as lore fans for a lot of these series, we like explanations. It like, what
yeah.
is it for you? Why do you like the explanation of why things are? Like, what does it do for you as a fan?
Honestly, I just like knowing things. Really, it's really just knowledge for the sake of knowledge for me. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, cool, that's a cool revelation because of this. Sometimes it does, sometimes it can lead to this larger realization of some kind. Like this one's almost assuredly false. But a while back, I got drunk and I had like a fever dream almost of this like revelation that the entire Halo universe is actually a simulation run by the precursors because X, Y, and Z. And it's like, it's so stupid, but it's so much fun at the same time. But that's really what it is. It's knowledge for the sake of knowledge, and it's having fun. And if you're not having fun while learning about this stuff, then I would say don't worry about it and just enjoy the game. If you can't enjoy the game without knowing this stuff, well,
Yeah, it's
I
meant
can
to.
sympathize.
I put it like this: when someone asks me, and I've had a couple of people ask me over the past couple of years, I think even this year, if I can relate to the MCU a little bit with WandaVision. I had a buddy of mine who was like, okay, I want to watch WandaVision, but like, shouldn't I go back and watch all the movies? And I'm like, you can, yeah. Because, of course, watching the movies and watching other Marvel shows, when a small Easter egg comes in, because these people know, like, they're not dumb. They know that there are people, hardcore fans of each series out there, that are going to go insane if there's a small Easter egg that 5% of the people watching or playing are going to notice. But it is that reason why they do it. And I told my buddy, I was like, you can go back and watch the movies. There's going to be a few things in the WandaVision show that you're going to be like, oh, I recognize that from that movie, or oh, I understand this. And it's the same, bring it back to Halo. If you go into the lore and read the books and do some of the comics, and you got a lot of time before Halo Infinite comes out, so I'm actually encouraging people to, if you want to get into the Halo series and not feel like you're completely left behind, this is the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because other than the book was just released, and there's a review of it up on your channel, I believe.
Point of Light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than that, like, this is a great time. It's a downtime in the Halo series. You can go back, you can replay the games, you can read some of the books, and the best part is with the Halo series, unlike the MCU, and you can tell me your perspective on this. You don't necessarily have to do everything in order to enjoy it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know that you necessarily have to do that with the MCU either, but I think it might be like it's the same sort of thing. Like, there's certain stuff that you can do out of order. The books, especially, are written in such a way that they're supposed to be welcoming to new fans, and a lot of the MCU movies are like that in a way too. So yeah, you can go out of your way to play it in order. You can play it out of order, and you shouldn't be too lost.
Yeah, no, I agree. But okay, let me get back to that question I asked you. So
Yes.
why is Cortana evil now? Or
That's an excellent question. No, so yeah, this is one of those ones where it's kind of painfully convoluted. Like I can kind of enjoy the nanomachines son meme with Master Chief's armor, but this one just kind of gets way too much for me. It's less enjoyable and more like, okay, I just got to know. So if anyone's played Halo 4, at the very end, during Halo 4, Cortana is going through what's called rampancy, which is kind of the easy way to oversimplify is it's AI dementia, AI Alzheimer's. She's literally incurring brain damage because she's been alive too long. She has too much knowledge. Again, I'm grossly oversimplifying, but I think it gets the point across. And at the end of that game, she starts splitting off all these rampant parts of herself. It won't actually cure her of anything, but it's done to muck up these Forerunner systems to give Master Chief a chance to, save the day. And all of those, as it's revealed in Halo 5, all those rampant personalities were stored within this Forerunner ship, which got pulled into slipspace and ended up on a planet called Genesis, which is featured prominently in Halo 5. And then from there, all the rampant personalities came together, creating the Cortana that we know in Halo 5, the evil Cortana, as it were, and which she's less evil and more because of the rampancy, her priorities have been shifted in a way that's not necessarily advantageous for the galaxy as a whole. At least as long as you believe in personal freedoms.
Yeah.
And in some cases being alive, because the Guardians kill people. I'm sorry. There's no way to justify that.
Do you think 343 could get themselves out of this hole? Because that's what it is. It's a hole.
Yeah. I think they could. I think the storyline with an evil Cortana and the AI takeover can be done right. Yeah, there's a lot of cliches about it, but I think Halo 5 left it open to have a more unique take on that. Like at least at that time, the Infinity AI, ship AI Roland hadn't affected, so you could have you could explore like, oh, some AI didn't, and why didn't they? Maybe, um, and I don't know. You could do something a little more interesting if you actually flesh out Cortana's real motivations in the game, because in Halo 5, unless you know like some of the history between John and Cortana, or you're really paying attention to some of these audio cues between the gameplay, um, her motivations just seem like, oh, I want to make the galaxy a better place. But there is a deeper, more personal story there to be told. It needs to become the main story being told, not the subtext.
And and therein lies the problem, because now you've introduced another Halo ring. You've introduced the Banished, which we won't get into too much, but if people haven't played Halo Wars 2, they're going to have absolutely no idea who those people are.
Yeah.
So you've introduced a lot of storylines which don't have ends that are tied up, but you have to find a way. Not even necessarily you need to find a way to tie them up, because we know there's going to be more Halo games. But I feel like the number one priority needs to be tying up this Cortana storyline, because I think from what I've seen, people are pretty sick of it. People are like, don't. And like you said, it can be done correctly, but it needs to be done in such a way that everyone understands the goal of Cortana here.
Yes.
And it needs to be done in a way where you're also going to be able to, do they tie it into the Banished storyline from Halo Wars? Do they tie it into, this ancient Halo ring that's, older than all the others? Time
and then
will
whatever
tell.
this Harbinger is.
Yep, whatever that is. Like, there's a lot of stuff they have to do. And, that's why we wanted to do the show, because there is so much stuff for this game. Like, there's a lot to understand. And I think like you mentioned before, what people need to get is, if you want to dive into this stuff, dive into it. You don't have to, it can feel overwhelming, for sure. Especially with the Halo series. It can 100% feel overwhelming. If you ever Google Halo Media and look at all of the stuff that's come out from Halo Media,
oh my God,
you will be at it for quite a while. But there are very key points that I think need to hit on. And before I let you go, I want you, if you could come up with 5, other than the games, because I think, in your opinion, do all the games, other than your Spartan Assaults and your top downs, those 2 top down games, do you think all of the games are worth playing if you want to get a whole idea of what's going on in the universe?
Yeah,
That can
absolutely.
also include Halo Wars included.
Oh yeah, definitely include Halo Wars in there. Like even with my misgivings about like Halo Reach, for example, I still it's still a fun game on its own, and it only becomes confusing when you start bringing in outside lore or vice versa. So yeah, the games themselves, have at them, and you should have a pretty good time. You might have some questions here and there, but I think the games do a decent enough job themselves to get you in the right place.
Yeah. Now, I know you mentioned Fall of Reach. Could you name 4 other pieces of content, in your opinion, that will enrich newer players or people that have never dove in to Halo lore before, that you think will say, hey, you know what? This is a great point that will tell you maybe a little bit more about, Halo 4. Maybe this will give you a little more backstory for Prometheans. Like, are there certain books or comics out there that you would recommend?
Definitely. Let me think about that for just a sec. I mean, the Halo graphic novel, that's an anthology comic series. That one's really good, and just has a bunch of cool little side stories. A lot of those are much more connected to Halo 2. So that'll give you a very rich experience with that game in particular. The recent Halo Shadows of Reach, that one is very much going to tie into Halo Infinite, from what we can tell. And that kind of gets you a good idea of the universe as it is post Halo 5. Gets you a good idea of what Master Chief has been up to. And I think it acts as a nice, like, soft introduction to the Banished for people that aren't familiar with them beyond maybe a name for their part in that tale. So let's see, that's Fall of Reach, Shadows of Reach, Halo graphic novel. Let's see, Halo Contact Harvest, written by Joe Staten, the original Halo writer, and
Great
solid
novel.
yes, and a solid it tells the very start of the Human Covenant War, so you get to see the origins of that conflict, why that conflict happens at all, which, fun fact, is not in the games.
And I feel like it should be.
You think,
I feel
though,
like that,
somehow the game
like the
skirt
Gears
by
of
without
War.
ever telling you that.
Yeah, like the Gears of War thing you were talking about earlier when they go back to the earlier wars. I feel like that would be an excellent thing, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just a small mission where you're, yeah, for people that haven't read the book, where there's the meeting between, the brutes and the humans for the first time, and
Mm-hmm.
you could be a soldier on the ground where you see that meeting go haywire, and all of these things start happening. So yeah, I 100% agree with you there.
Yeah. And I think my last one would be Halo Evolutions, which might be kind of a cheat because it's an anthology book, but it's a damn good anthology. And that just kind of gets you a taste of every part of the Halo universe at once. You get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's just, if you want an experience to really delve you into it without throwing you into the deep end,
Mhm.
Halo Evolutions is a good way to go.
Yeah. My final question for you.
Mhm.
Halo Infinite, give me three things that you specifically want to see in it that will make you a much happier Halo fan.
My top request is a wrap up of a proper conclusion, I should say, to the created storyline. So, and that would include some Prometheans in there. I don't think they should be tossed out. I think Halo 5 took what was an interesting idea in Halo 4, but a flawed execution, and made them much more engaging. And now 343 they have like the perfect opportunity to redesign them yet again, as needed, both visually and gameplay wise. As all you have to say is, oh, these are Cortana's versions of the Prometheans now, and she retooled them because X, Y, and Z. If you need an explanation at all. Um, so yeah, proper created storyline wrap up. Side quests that dive into the deep lore of Installation 07 and its history, which I think we kind of got hints that that's going to happen in even the very first reveal trailers. If anyone remembers, there was that scene in the cave, and the light on the wall illuminates like this weird writing there. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking that might be related to like diving into the past. And then in a perfect world, I would want like either a hub world or an exploration mode where you can just drive across the entire campaign area
Yeah.
and just explore it as much as you want.
Kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever did the Assassin's Creed like history mode, I think it was called, where you could go in
Oh
and
yeah, from that was from the ancient Egypt one, right?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
where
I
you could
never
kind of just
played
go.
that one, but I've seen some people like, yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, where you
Still don't
go
know
in
that.
and everything that you see kind of gives you a bit of a context to it and kind of gives you a little bit of background lore, which again you can tie into your idea of the
Mhm.
codex, which I think is
For
really
sure.
cool. But yeah, that is it for our first episode. Ian, I really appreciate you doing this. Where can people, if people want to dive in a little bit more into the Halo series, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at TOA_FREAK, Toa Freak, or my main YouTube channel, of course, youtube.com/Halo Canon, Canon spelled Canon.
Awesome, and you post pretty regularly. It's a lot of Ian's content is a lot of good, easy to dive into stuff, and there's also some stuff for the more hardcore people there. So
Yeah.
you don't
And even the
necessarily,
hardcore stuff, I try to hold people's hand as much as possible. It's like,
yeah.
and this relates to this, which is actually about this from back here, yada yada. I try not to just toss people into the deep end, unless it's for the lulls, in which case those ones will be pretty obvious.
And I gotta ask you before we go. I saw your video reviewing the
Yeah.
MOA Pringles. Ha-
Yes.
that was a great video. How were they? Are they?
That my reaction in there is genuine.
Yeah.
They were actually like, I was prepared to like fake, oh, they're really good, but it's like, oh wow, those are actually good. Like, it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to buy more of, but for what it is, it's pretty good. It kind of tastes like like a Cajun burger, really.
Okay.
So
I'm hoping they have them. Like I'm in Canada, so I'm hoping they they have them up here. I really want to try them. Um, but yeah, like it's so weird because all of the Halo Infinite marketing stuff is out, and like it's already half of it's gone. Like all like the
yeah,
Pringles stuff and like the chip, like the Pringle stuff kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know if
that
they
was
always meant to
like
launch it.
yeah.
But yeah, it's already like I'm very curious, and that's an entirely different conversation about like are they gonna just redo a lot of this marketing stuff when Halo Infinite finally comes out? Are
I
they
imagine
just
they must be like making new deals, like to for what like for specific things. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
yeah. It's again business aspect, but yeah,
Yeah,
I've never seen a company. I can't say that I've ever seen a company have this much marketing
for a
ready to
game that
go
isn't.
and be like, okay, never mind, it's not coming out for an entire extra year. So yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what happens. Ian, I want to thank you again for coming on. You can follow
thank you for
me.
having me.
Yeah, awesome. Anytime you want to come back on, I always love talking Halo stuff.
Yes.
You can follow me at Hoopstar245 on Twitter. And for myself, Ian, and the rest of the MP First crew, this has been Daunting Games, Episode 1. Thank you very much.